Hey guys, welcome to Chris Horner's Corner, where I want to get a little bit more into the nutritional here on today's episode of Chris Horner's Corner because I just got done finishing doing a hard interval here on Zwift. No, just kidding, because I don't do intervals. But if you got a personal coach, most likely that coach has been telling you how many intervals you have to do every day of the week. And I'm here to kind of debunk that and go into something even more important than how many intervals you did on your training. So let me hop off of Zwift right here and get over to the table so I can show you guys basically what I did through my pro career in terms of calories that's sitting inside my race pocket when I was ready to go and then just there after the race. See you guys on the other side of the table. All right, so I'm back over here at the table and I brought some nutritional products, some food, something that's going to help you guys get through your training rides. And of course, the kids out there that are racing, or even the older guys out there that are racing doing the master stuff, these are the kind of calories you're going to have inside your pocket and to get through your racing, depending on the length of your race, or of course, going through your training ride. Now, I've had many times where I've coached athletes and they've come to me and they say, wow, I'm doing this for intervals, but I'm running out of power and stuff. And I always kind of laugh and giggle about they're doing intervals because throughout my 25 years of professional racing, I probably did a handful, maybe 2 handfuls total of intervals throughout 25 years of professional bike racing in my training. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't ride hard and I didn't have exceptionally hard training rides. I'm just saying I never did 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, 30 seconds on, 1 minute off, 30 seconds on. I never did any ridiculous kind of intervals like that, like I always hear coaches talking about, and then leaving out the important things like food. Now, I had one kid last year I was talking to, and he's trying to explain to me what he's doing, and I said, wait a minute, what does your coach have you doing for food while you're racing? He says, we never talk about food. I said, your coach never talks to you about food? Fire him right now. And if you got a coach out there that you're paying good money to, and he's not telling you about what you should be eating, when you should be eating it, and how much you should be eating, you should probably fire him too, because food is much more important than how many intervals you did during your week of training. Most important thing, I think, when it comes to racing is, of course, training, sleep, your diet, and when you ate your calories. And on the bike, you have to have calories. One last example before I get into what I got in front of me here. I had a good friend of mine, and we go out for a training ride. He was a little big, a little heavy, a little bit overweight and stuff, so he was back on his diet again, and he decided he wanted to diet through the training ride. I looked at him, I go, you don't ever diet when you're training. You diet after training, but you don't diet right before training, and you certainly don't diet during training. If you want to diet a little bit after your training meal, your training meal that you have after you finish training, then you can start dieting and cutting calories a little bit tighter then. But everything you're doing on the bike is to make sure that you finish with power all the way to the end of your ride. If you come home and you've bunked and say you bunked for 30 minutes or 1 hour or sometimes something even ridiculous as 2 hours out there, you did your training completely wrong. Throughout my years, this is what I lived off of here, was always a little bit of electrolytes that's inside the bottles. I always had 1 bottle with water, 1 bottle with electrolytes often, and especially electrolytes if I was going into a really hot race. The colder races, I can find my calories through sodas and through candy and through, of course, the race foods and stuff like that that the pro teams give you. But when it came to the hotter races, you're really burning a lot of the electrolytes, and that's where something like the Hydro here that I have set up from Arma, where this is important because it's just bringing back the electrolytes, not adding calories though. So this is not going to get you through the calories that you need on the race, but it's going to get back those electrolytes that you're missing, like the magnesium and stuff that you're sweating out. This stuff's important on the hotter days and certainly important on the longer training days when you're burning through all those electrolytes. But what you really need when you're out there and you're training hard is you're going to need calories, big time calories. And so that's why I have my main staple through 25 years of racing over in Europe. I would go with my own suitcase, and I'd always go with a bunch of Cliff Bars, and they had either Cliff Bars like this or shot blocks, whatever you want to call them. I had everything that was set up that way because they travel well in the back pocket, and so you didn't have to worry about something like this melting. Now, when it came to something like a Snickers and a Coke, this was my go-to calories right before the finish of the race. When we're getting near about 50, 40K to go, I'd always go to a Snickers and a Coke. And you're like, Chris, the Snickers melt. They do melt, but at the professional peloton, we have not 1, but 2 cars following the professional peloton. So when my teammates drop back, or if I drop back, I'd always ask for my Snickers that came out of the cooler that wasn't melted. They'd always pass me up a Coca-Cola. And that's where we get the main bulk of the calories at the finish, because nothing goes in as quickly as liquid with as much sugar that's inside the Coca-Colas here. So if you look at the pro teams, they all have Coca-Cola in their coolers because that's what's getting them through the finish of the race. Now I want to talk about one other thing when you're going in and you're using something like Coca-Cola or any kind of soda for your racing. If you have an empty stomach, it can upset the stomach, so you want to make sure you dilute the stomach a little bit before you drink the soda. So you put down like half a bottle of water first, and that will get the stomach a little more comfortable to absorb the massive amount of sugar that you're going to put into it from a 20-ounce Coca-Cola. But I've had amazing results throughout my pro career with a king-size Snickers and a Coca-Cola. And then, of course, afterwards, what I didn't use it often when I was just in training, but in racing, or if, say, you're training with a bunch of buddies and you're going to drive home, the protein drinks were easy to keep in the car because you can just mix them up in the car. That'd get you to your next meal if you don't have time to prepare a meal for straight after you're racing. Now, of course, in the European Peloton, we were jumping into a big old bus that had all of our food prepared. So when we got done racing, I could go up into the bus, have a sandwich already set up for me, a little bit of sweets right there, and another soda that I'd down right after the race. And so mainly I would use the proteins when I'm at home on my own and you're just further away from the house and you know you're going to be 30 minutes or 1 hour away from a meal right after your training so you can get some kind of calories into you. That's when I like the protein drinks. So I'll put that up here. But oftentimes at the races we had so much food available inside the bus that the protein drinks I would go to later only if I thought I needed some extra calories when I'm back at the hotel. It wasn't my go-to right afterwards, but certainly the electrolytes, those were absolutely a necessity. Now, like I said, if you have a coach, you need to ask them, like, what do I need to be doing for eating? Or you need to turn into the Chris Horner's Corner, because I'll tell you right here, if they're only giving you intervals, which I don't believe in anyways, and that's most likely what your coach is giving you more than anything else, then you need to find a different coach that can be more well-rounded and get you all the way into that Gran Fondo event or that group ride on Saturday or Sunday. And certainly if you're going to the Tour de France, you need to know how many calories you're putting in your body, when to diet and when to use them. And when you're racing, the number one rule when you're racing is you always eat, you always have enough calories, and you diet after the race. You diet in training. So if you're getting into a diet mode, you want to get a little bit thinner, let me tell you guys right now, 100%, no doubt, no discussion is needed. You do not diet when you're on the bike and you're trying to get leaner. Leave that for later, afterwards, throughout the night. Have yourself a nice salad or something like that if you're not racing the next day or you're not doing the group ride. But remember, always as I tell my athletes all the time, if your pockets are empty and there's no food in your pockets, that means your bank account's empty and you got nothing left to be able to finish that race. You need to always have some kind of substance in your pocket at all times. Never have your pockets empty. Always keep them full with something that you can reach into. And when you've reached in and you've pulled out your last bar and you've eaten it, that means that it's time to stop at that 7-Eleven or that gas station and refuel if you're any further than an hour away from home, because something as just one bar, once you eat it, it will not be enough to get you home if you're on a good training ride and the conditions are right. Never bonk. If your coach is telling you that you go to the end of the ride and you basically bring all your calories empty, if you've been empty for anything longer than it takes to open up your garage door and load your bike back into the house and go get yourself some food, you went too far and you've bonked too much, and that's going to affect your ride for the next day, which is going to affect possibly the next day, next 2 days, next 3 days even if you've bonked hard. So keep in mind, if your pockets are empty, think about it like your bank account. If your pockets are empty, so is your bank account. That means you're not going to get home and you're not going to be as good for the next day of ride. Hope this helps you guys out. Remember, the short end, when you're kind of looking at calories, I see it as a guy at my size. I raced at about 140 pounds, always fluctuating a little bit, about 3 pounds this way, that way. When I was in Europe, 137 was about my height, or my weight, sorry. And then racing in the U.S., if I was anything around 140, 143, I was always super competitive in the U.S. at that weight, and anything in Europe that right around 137. At that kind of weight, I needed about 800 calories per hour when I was racing in order to stay strong and not bonk at any time during the race to be good at the finish of the race. Now, if you're a little bit smaller, if you're female, you're talking about 115 pounds or something, you can do with less calories than 800. But if you're 137, 140, about 800 calories an hour when you're racing, 600 calories an hour when you're training is what you want if you're training, because it's not quite as intense. But if you're a bigger guy, you got to add and adjust for those calories. So if you're somebody that's 180, you got to add more than 800 calories if you're racing, and certainly more than 600 if you're training and you're doing any kind of hard training rides with some groups of guys. You don't want to come home bonked. Keep in mind, you can't always do just 600 per hour. It's never going to work out like that. You have to eat a little bit before the race begins, and then of course you have to adjust during the race. When the racing slows down, that's when you eat, and that's when you put in some extra calories. So it's never spot on 600 per hour, but if you rode 5 hours, that's 3,000 calories if you're in training. So at the end of the day, you need to have 3,000 calories on top of your 2,000 calorie daily that you're supposed to be eating normally. So if you've got a 5-hour ride, we're talking about 3,000 calories for that 5 hours plus the 2,000 that you would normally eat that day. So if you did a 5-hour ride, 100-mile ride, maybe 90-mile ride, we're talking about 5,000 calories you need on that day. That's a lot of calories, so you need to be eating throughout the whole part of the day if you want to be good for the next ride the following day. Otherwise, you're going to affect your training dramatically. Hope this helped you guys out. Make sure you like and subscribe. Chris Horner's Corner. I'll try to find some more information and something else to bring you out there to try to help your training rides and get you ready for that Saturday ride or the Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.